Hello, everybody. Welcome to the final episode of 2024, episode number 193. And by the way, the title of today's show should be called "Just Three Dads," because we have a cohort, a colleague, somebody who is he calls himself a dadvocate, which I love. By the way, Autism Dadvocate has an Autism Dadvocate podcast. But an incredible background and incredible contributor to our community. And we're really anxious to have today's conversation with Paul Carroll. So stay tuned for another episode of Just Two Dads. I'm so excited about today's episode. I didn't even introduce myself or Sean, which I've never done before, but it's what happens, right? And we're going live. We don't edit. For anybody who's watched any of our episodes, we don't edit. This is not we don't do an ultra overly produced podcast because as parents in the special needs community, life is not polished. It's not a sitcom. It's not a reality show. Life is real to all of us and it comes as it comes, and we deal with it as it comes. So we love to do these episodes, organically. And we've told our guests sometimes it's freaked them out that we don't edit. We go right out, and sometimes we make mistakes and forget to introduce ourselves. So that being said, I'm Brian Altunian along with Sean Francis, and we're We're in the middle of our fourth season. We've been doing this for 4 years. Sean and I are parents of children with special needs issues, and we are colleagues in the financial services world, and we decided one day that the financial services world doesn't really address families who are dealing with special needs issues. And it's now 1 in 36 that have diagnosis of autism, and that number seems to be going down. And the issues of special needs has expanded significantly to incorporate a lot of other folks. So we felt that our community should be served by every industry. And as we were having conversations as dads of special needs children, we thought this is a conversation that people should get some value out of. And we keep finding amazing people who are serving our community. 4 years, we're going strong. We've got a whole list of people for 2025. So we're really, really excited about the upcoming year and rounding out this year. Today is going to be a great episode to finish 2024. And so before we jump into it, just want to thank you if you're joining us on Facebook Live. We really appreciate you giving up a little bit of your day, or if you're seeing us after the fact on Facebook Live, leave a comment. Let us know that if there's questions or something that you'd like us to know about, or ask of the guest, or a comment that you'd like to make. We're happy to put it up live. Still going. If you're catching us after the fact on our website at justtwodadspodcast.com, or on our YouTube channel, which is way too long for me to talk over to say over the screen. Again, subscribe, hit like. If you're listening to us on podcast outlets or on WSTX AM radio down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, thank you for making us part of your listening day. We appreciate and love each and every one of you. And again, hope that we add value, and your comments are amazing. And if you want to send us an email, we are just2dads@gmail.com. It's up on the screen. We are just2dads@gmail.com. Send us an email, especially if you want to join our father support group at the Den. Send us an email or comments, or talk about how great my hair looks today. Whatever. We'll take any and all input. Also, our partners, Billy Footwear, that make amazing adaptive footwear for people of all sizes, ages, abilities. Billy Footwear is an amazing organization, and the story of Billy Price is one of inspiration and awe. And I encourage you, if you do nothing else, go to billyfootwear.com and read up on Billy's story. But if you do, click on the link that we have on our show notes. Whatever sale they've got going on, use our link and you'll get an additional 15% off. That's our contribution to help both Billy Footwear, but help our community as well. So we highly encourage you to do that. So without further ado, we are very excited again as we're ending this year to be having this conversation. And it's going to be one of those where I feel like we should all have a cup of coffee, and I feel like you're all going to be viewing or listening to us as if you're, eavesdropping on a coffee conversation, because there's just so much synergy and so much good feeling and energy here. So Can't wait to get into our conversation with Paul. That being said, I'm going to throw it over to Sean. He'll introduce Paul, and we'll jump into it. Sean, how you doing? You all right? You look you're good. You're good. You ready?
I'm ready to stop talking. You know how they have the bull in the stables of the bullfight. Just let them out and they're ready to go. I'm just trying to do that because I want to jump right into today's show. I'm grateful, blessed, excited, and happy. And our guest today is someone that is he's a father to an amazing 18-year-old son. As you mentioned, he's a self-proclaimed dadvocate. He's the founder and creator of Autism Support Forum for Parents, Everydad, and the Autism Dadvocate podcast. And he's got 20 years plus experience leading teams, learning and development, talent acquisition development, and leadership development. And I am excited for him to be here, generally speaking, but I'm always amazed at the onion that is life, that continues to get peeled back when you have conversations with each other, which is why human beings are so precious on this planet. As much as an advocate as I am, he said something in our conversation prior to the show that really struck me, where he just said, that he sees that most of the fathers that he's speaking to that are caregivers or parents to those with special needs just feel invisible and not seen or heard. And that just really struck a chord with me. And I just want to welcome to the show, Paul Carroll. Welcome, Paul.
Well, thank you very much. I cannot tell you how honored I am to be here and the immense feeling of gratitude I feel. And I am really looking forward to this conversation. As you said, Sean, we had a great sort of pre-rehearsal conversation that will set the tone for today's dialogue. So I am thrilled.
It's exciting.
Well, let's jump right into it. One of the first qualifications for being a hero is to not see yourself as a hero, right? And that definitely fits the bill with you. But you're a hero because of the work that you do. And all heroes have superpowers. All heroes' superpowers come from their origin. So tell us a little bit about where you come from spiritually, physically, emotionally, from a family standpoint, because all those things have everything to do with how we face the day of diagnosis and what we make of the challenge that's been then put before us. So why don't we start with that?
Yeah. It's funny. I love the question because you say hero, and I would describe my life as the most boring, nondescript, uneventful, unremarkable, but I'll share it, and it leads to a seminal point in my life, which will probably be the crux of today's conversation. So I was born and raised in the Providence, Rhode Island area. I'm a native New Englander. I am the youngest of three boys in a very nondescript, uneventful upbringing. Went to college in the big city of Boston College. And this is funny because in Just Two Dads, I feel like a lot of my life was the playbook, right, Jen? So we go to school, we go to college, we get our degree, we get a job, we get married, we have kids, we buy a house. And I would say my life was boring and nondescript because I followed the playbook.
Yep.
With one small exception and then one big exception. So I married my wife. We are still married 21 years. Amazing. And like most couples, we wanted to have children. This was the first hiccup in the playbook. I don't know about your own experience. I said, well, how long could it take? 3 months? 6 months? 9 months? 12 months? Well, after 2 years of trying, my wife and I had to pursue a fertility route. That was the first thing that really threw us. And like most couples, we pursued everything the healthcare system offered, things like IUI, and then ultimately we graduated to IVF. Why I like to say this story is important is as many of the listeners are aware, IVF is an incredibly expensive procedure, even with health insurance.
Right.
Incredibly expensive. So it's not something you can keep trying. You hope for the best.
What is, and I'm familiar with IVF as most people probably are. What is IUF?
Oh, IUI.
Intrauterine.
Intrauterine insemination. And Sean, you'll love this metaphor. it's similar to artificial insemination with cows. It's just on a human level. So
wow. Okay.
It's the step before IVF, in vitro
okay.
fertilization.
Okay.
But I like to share this story because it may be inspiring to dads or aspiring or anticipatory dads, because my wife, we went through the retrieval, we took the fertility drugs. When the retrieval was done, we only were able to harvest, I believe it was 3 eggs, and then we did the in vitro, and we got the phone call anxiously from the doctor's office, and they said, Mr. and Mrs. Carroll, we regret to inform you that none of the eggs have fertilized.
No.
So it's more of an art than a science, but we learned some things for next time. So I remember vividly hanging up the phone, sharing the news with my wife and saying, I don't know if there's a next time, just financially. Maybe we need to pursue an adoption route.
Wow.
Right.
The following morning, we get a call at 7 a.m. And I don't know about the two of you. I don't like a phone call early in the morning.
No.
But we answered the call.
Answered
the call, and the doctor said, Mr. Carroll, something unusual has happened. One of your eggs has fertilized itself into a 2-cell overnight. We need you and your wife to come into the doctor now. Today. We need you to come in now. And it was snowing here in New England, and my wife and I were in a frenzy trying to call work and go to Women and Infants Hospital here in Providence, Rhode Island. They immediately prepped my wife for the procedure. The doctor immediately said, I just want to inform you, we are only inserting 1 2-cell embryo. Your chances of having a active or a viable pregnancy are very low. And my wife said, I don't care. That is my son. That is my son.
Wow.
Who statistically, it was a viable pregnancy, and I have one son whom we're going to talk about. But that is the miracle of my life. I call him my 2-cell miracle.
It really, I mean, we don't think about it. We talk about it all the time. It's miraculous that any of us are here.
Right? So
you just like level. Yeah, that's amazing.
Brian it always tells me, we talk about, he'll tell me there's so much need to repeat what somebody just said because you don't want to take a professorial approach to the show. But I just think people that are listening, whether live or after the fact, stop and think about the things that you might take for granted. That's something else.
It's one thing to think about it from a spiritual perspective, but that now add some mathematical, anomalies and chances. And I mean,
you fought for him to be here. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's clearly a reason.
Yeah. I believe all of us as men have one miracle sometime in my life, and that I have my one. So I'm done. I'm all done. I don't know if you've had yours, and if you haven't, you will have it, but I got my one miracle.
It's funny.
Wow.
It sort of depends, I think, on how you evaluate the level of miraculousness, because I look for miracles all the time. And so I see them all the time. I'm amazed by some of the simple things in life that we always say that we take for granted. And I look at those, I'm like, that's pretty miraculous. How many times I've, missed, being getting into an accident, or, having something terrible happen that didn't happen, whatever. Like, I find that there's a lot of instances that in this particular case, truly, this is one of those standouts. I love this. Yeah. I love this story so far. Keep going. This is exciting. This
is so he's your only child then?
He is my only child.
Wow. So tell us, let's stick with the chronology then. So he's born.
Yep. And a wonderful son, fantastic, nothing eventful, even young. What I would say is I did not, my son, and I'll get to his diagnosis in just a moment, there were no telltale signs really early on. Verbally, he was fine. There were a few yellow flags, but they were small. I would say his gross motor skills and his fine motor skills were different. I'd take my son to the playground and he would be very trepidatious on any of the like the swings, the apparatus. I'd see girls just kicking his butt climbing up these playground ladders. I'm thinking, why is this so hard for him? But I really thought nothing of it. And later on, I would say by the age of 4 or 5, I started to notice what I would call quirks. Again, yellow flags. He loved to like write Arabic letters in rows and rows and rows on pieces of paper. He would look up a YouTube video and he would memorize them and just write them over and over. He would do the same thing for shapes. Very interesting patterns of play that were unique. Again,
I'm glad you said that he looked them up on YouTube, because prior to you saying that, I was like, hold up. Where's he's just writing Arabic or Aramaic, or like, wait a minute, hold on. It's like, you need to have a conversation with him, because there's a higher power going.
Yeah, we moved into the world of metaphysical. Yeah,
Sean, I vividly recall the YouTube video that he would watch over and over with the music in the background, and it would walk through every Arabic letter, and he would take that in and then just do it line by line by line over and over on pads. And
let me ask you this.
Behaviors.
Wow.
Just out of curiosity, because I always say when a child is nonverbal, your expectations or the task of straddling the fence between expectations and possibilities is a lot easier when your child is verbal and capable of articulating things clearly, and at the same time struggling with articulation. It's a little more difficult to manage. And so the things that my son does, or that he's into when looking at YouTube videos, are things that are just as interesting. We're like, I wonder why he does that. And he can't really explain to us exactly what it is. Is your son able to tell you, looking back on that, or things that he did at any point in time, able to tell you why?
You know, it's such a great question, because my son does have strong emotional vocabulary, and he gets stuck on describing things like you just described. When I say, well, why do you have a reaction? Tell me what happens when this happens. And for example, younger, when he would have meltdowns, he says, I don't know, Daddy. I get stuck and I can't stop. And it's interesting that this young boy who has a very rich vocabulary struggles to articulate some of the challenges with his autism.
Yeah.
And so that's an insight for all of us, I think.
Exactly. And we can't ever tire of the question. When I'm at my best, I'm asking the question with care, which is, I wonder why he does that. There was something that my son, we had a situation this morning where I said, I wonder why he doesn't do that. It's something that's more of a quote unquote normal behavior. My wife's response is, well, he doesn't do that on purpose. It's like, no. I'm literally wondering, and that's me at my best. At my worst, I'll ask the question, but it's wishing that it didn't take place. Like, gosh, I wonder why he does that. Then I catch myself and I'm like, wait a minute. No, I really, then I dig deep. On the surface, it's about me. Oh my gosh, why does he do that? When you're digging, you're like, I want to know. And sometimes I'll have him look me in the eye. Let me ask you this. And you try and you just, you can't ever stop trying though. You can't ever stop asking. Yeah. But that's the same thing of the world in general.
Yeah. Sean, Paul, did he stop? Your audio went off for some reason.
Yeah, I think you accidentally muted yourself, and you were saying something very insightful. So I can tell that you're muted.
It was a great point. We never heard it.
Yeah, repeat it. We want to hear your insight.
Brilliant.
And that's bizarre because my mouse didn't touch anything. I saw that. But what I was saying is when I'm at my best, I'm asking the question to know, which is, I wonder why he does that, or I wonder why he doesn't do that. And then I'll look him in the eye and ask him sometimes, hey, buddy, tell me something. Why do you do so-and-so? And sometimes he can answer the question. Sometimes he'll repeat it. I'll say, why do you do so-and-so? And he'll go, why do you do that? And he'll just repeat it back, and he can't necessarily articulate it. When I'm at my worst, I'm asking the question, and it's about me. It's not about him. why does he do that? I just like, man, and it's sheer frustration. And I've been going through something lately where I've been facing my frustrations and the gap between my patients and my wife's, and we have conversations about that. And the other thing I'm observing, and I'm wondering if you have gone through this, especially because your son is the same age as mine. I found that we were driving someplace the other day, and his questions, because when he wants something, he's locked in and he'll ask for it. He'll get the answer, but he may still ask again. And I felt overstimulated trying to drive and hear the question being asked. And my wife said, "What do you want me to drive?" And I was like, "No, I can drive." But I was like, "Wait a minute." Then I'm asking myself, why am I overstimulated? So I'm wondering if you find that your sensitivities to things have risen over the years dealing with his quirks. Have you found that to take place?
I have. And there's two things you said that really land with me. One is a theme I think the three of us will talk about is, as dads, we can never not lean into curiosity enough.
For sure.
Yeah.
Curiosity is the key to progress in this arena, number one. And then secondly, my experience is similar to yours, where I'm asked a question, I answer it, and I'm asked a question again, and I'm asked a question again. And like you, I have that maybe defensive curiosity. Why do you do that? And what I've learned is he asks the question for curiosity, but the second, the third, the fourth time, it's not about curiosity.
It's not. Yeah.
It's about keeping them in the it keeps them in a good place, because Sean and Brian, they know the answer.
Yeah.
They know the answer. And you answering the question again just keeps them good. Keeps my son good. I shouldn't be presumptuous, but I've learned that about my son. This is how he keeps himself in a good place.
I want to.
I think.
Go ahead, Brian.
I think that even for neurotypical folks, that's habit. You know, it's how we create a habit, right? The things that we are comfortable doing over and over and over again gives us, right? That how we form habits. And in fact, sometimes we form bad habits, but it keeps us in a place of comfort. It keeps us in a place that we can control to some degree. And I often find that in, you know, and I have 3 children, one that has, you know, cognitive processing issues. She's 29 years old. Conversations with her are much different than with my 18-year-old son, neurotypical son. But some of that is the same for them. It just comes out a little bit differently. How they process the world is a little bit different. But it all comes from that place of, I know the answer. I still want it because it's something that I can control and gives me sort of boxed in and comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah.
3 things.
Yeah, Brian, it's so true, because if you think about those on the spectrum, what typically do they lean into? Predictability,
right,
and consistency. If
right.
I'm asking a question, I already know the answer. Predictability and consistency. So yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, three things I wanted to point out. The first one is it's good to have someone in your life or your corner that can help you straddle the fence between this is what happens as a result of my child's diagnosis, and wait a minute, even though this other thing may happen as a result of your child's diagnosis, that too is part of the neurotypical world. Brian serves as that for me, despite his daughter's diagnosis. My wife and I can't necessarily serve as that because we're both straddling the same fence. That's point number 1. So
you muted again, John.
So weird. This time I'm going to keep looking for it. And I think it's a provider issue or something like that.
All right. And you muted again. There it is. It's just, you called them out and they muted.
Yeah.
You.
Let unplug and you.
All right. Let's see what happens.
And Brian, while Sean takes care of that, I think that's a theme I'd love for the 3 of us to talk about, is the dynamic between husband, wife, partners, because that truly is the catalyst for the Autism Dadvocate work. It's so important.
We can lean right into that. Yeah.
Okay.
That was my second point, which is you keep articulating or or finding a way for me to express what I've been trying, what I may struggle with. Like, for instance, there's ways in which there's a difference, an obvious difference in the dynamics between men and women when it comes to both caregiving and being a parent to one with special needs. And the one that you pointed out is that women are naturally more curious than men. So as you said, for men in particular, I always talk about on the show, we need to raise our curiosity, but as men, we need to really raise our curiosity, because women do that a lot more, naturally. And then the third thing I wanted to thank you for is, belonging to multiple groups on social media. I hear people respond many times with a lack of curiosity. Well, there's some things that do apply when you say our kids this, or people on the spectrum do this, or they want this, they want that. What you just pointed out is something that I try to do, which is say, well, here's my experience. This is what my child does. This is what has happened. And that needs to be applied to things generally in life, because we make so much generalizations. And kudos to you for not only doing it, but you did the opposite, caught yourself and then corrected that. And I think that is huge. That again is a product of raising one's consciousness and asking questions and thinking about what you think about. We can never be too self-aware. So thank you for all of that.
We can never be too self-aware. We can never be too curious. And you can call me out if I make those types of sweeping generalizations. And Sean, it's funny, if with this amazing podcast that the two of you put together, and maybe this even comes up in the den, and not to get pedantic, but anything you learn from curiosity about your child is something that we as dads need to lean into, even if it goes against us. So I'll give myself an example, and then I want to hear from the two of you. My son at one point was fanatical about the video game Mario Kart. I am not a video game guy, but you want to know what? I got fanatical about Mario Kart because he cared about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really interested in the Arabic alphabet. My son was, so I was as well. And I think that's what we learn as fathers. Like, how about football? How about the Boston Celtics? No, we're going to go here, and I will go there with you. I'd be curious if you had the same experience.
I do at my best, and at my worst, I don't. I keep speaking to myself. I should go by the name Gemini. I'm like constantly looking at the best and worst of myself, because ordinarily, to be honest, what happens is when he's stimulated, like for instance, the other day, he was looking, we had to take him to urgent care the other day, and we were waiting for the doctor, and he had his phone. And when he's really stimulated, he's on the phone and he's looking at it. He's like, like if you can see me, looking at the video, he's stimulated and shaking and smiling though. And I was saying to my wife, I was like, I wonder what he's feeling right now. I wonder what that is that he's doing. That's at his best. Other times where he's stimulated, what he does is he's just kind of like, will literally make a noise, and there isn't a purpose to it. And if I'm going about my business, whatever have you, maybe watching TV or something, like, dude, you're louder than the TV. I can't hear it. Inside voice. And that's me at my worst. Last night, what I did is I went upstairs to the bedroom to actually check on him, and he was making that noise. And I came over to him and I said, okay, stop for a second. Stop. If you're going to do that, I said to him, if you can't beat him, join him. Say that. And he goes, if you can't beat him, join him, having no idea what it means. So I said, go ahead and make your noise, but make it here. And he goes, I said, stay there. Same note. So I go, and I'm up. So it only lasted for about 5 seconds, but we were harmonizing for a second. And I'd love to tell you, I'm a great dad and we do that all the time, but that's not true. It's not. But I could feel my wife looking over and seeing something different. And for anybody that's listening to this and they're just like, oh my gosh, what a great dad. That's fantastic. That's not the norm. That's me working. You know what I mean? I'm more prone to be like, inside voice, inside. That's so loud inside. But I'm more prone to complain about it. But I catch myself at times, and that happens just last night. So there's some divinity going on in us having these this conversation about the topic. Yeah. Go ahead, Brian.
For sure. And I would say, again, I think that the distinction in, neurotypical and neurodiverse folks is two things, two sides of it, right? One is processing, input. And then the second is the other side of it, which is expressing and how you express, how you process the world as you take in stimulus, and then, what that means and how that's internalized, and then this outward expression of it. And I think we all have some variation of it. Some of us just have a little bit more access to, what we would consider, a more broader way of doing things. But I think about what you both are talking about. And again, I'm not dealing with this spectrum per se, but between my three children, how they take in stimulus and process it and then express it is so different. They're like three alien families. Like there's no relationship between them when it comes to, finding some commonality in how they do things. Blake, my son, is typically boy, aggressive, 18-year-old, and also like will just numb out and not talk to anybody. My middle daughter is incredibly emotional, really on top of things, and probably high up on the intellectual scale, and yet emotionally she processes everything through her emotions, and it's completely different. And then Jordan, my oldest, she takes input on and expresses at a surface level, very much similar to what you two are talking about, in an area that gives her comfort. And if a stimulus is over stimulating for her, she has a hard time taking that in and processing it, and it leads to, often, I don't want to say bad behavior, but not what we consider societal.
She doesn't serve herself well. Yeah.
She does. And sometimes we'll have a hard time understanding where she crosses into a territory that could be dangerous to her, to her psyche, to her body, to everything. And so, it's interesting. They process the world and express completely differently. And I think all of our children do that. And as dads, our goal is to try to figure out how to just dance. And Sean, I think what you bring up is something that all dads deal with, which is how much of this is age appropriate for them in general, and how much of this is what they're doing is our processing of what we observe. Right. As dads, we're like, oh, we want to fix that, we want to change that, stop that, don't do that. Right.
So Brian, you said something very important. We want to fix that. And Sean, I'm going to go back to a comment you said. My wife tends to be a little bit more on the empathy side, which I think all of us dads look at our spouses and say that. Yeah. What do we as dads do? We default to solutions, we default to fixing, and we default to controlling this situation. And so another theme I think is important for this community to hear as us dads: you have to let go. You have to release. There is no fix. There is no solution. You just have to ride that wave. And I'll say for myself, that was really hard as a type A control freak and it was part of the catalyst of Autism Dadvocate. Like, what do I do? Guess what? You're not going to always have the answers.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. For sure. And I consider myself to be more empathetic than the average man, but yet everything you just said still applies to me. Let me ask you this. So one thing the show has done is gotten me to really take a look at myself and convince myself, well, not necessarily a shocking thing, because I've always struggled academically, but present as intelligent. So I am someone that both my mom and dad should have been bald by 30, just because I drove them crazy when it came to school. When I got good grades, as opposed to just being glad, my dad would go, "See, you could do that every time if you just apply yourself. Some of just stuff just would come so easy to you if you would just try." So I've always tried to figure out, well, what is it? And Brian and I have talked about it, and you look at other episodes, you're like, keep thinking that there's ADD or something in there. But what I noticed is I was listening to a podcast by Alex Hermosi, who was a personal development guru and business guy, and he was talking about the importance of being able to focus and one being distracted, because I am easily distracted. And just as important as knowing what to focus on is knowing what to eliminate. And I've always had trouble eliminating. I have to like really lock in on a given moment and task, because as I'm focusing on one, there's an idea or topic that pops up in my head. My mouth can't keep up with my brain. So I'm wondering about the connection between that and my sensitivity to like overstimulation. So the discovery that I'm talking about is literally this week, when I'm realizing that because I used to be able to, like, I'm doing one thing and I have something else on in the background, whether it's music or, you know, a podcast or something, doing three things at once. And what we've learned over time is that there's no such real true thing as multitasking. If you're doing that, something suffers. So I'm wondering about you, as you've discovered the sensitivities that you've developed based on your experience with your son as well. Because like I said, mine is like less than 7 days old. I've just realizing, wait a minute, I'm usually noise and stuff doesn't bother me like that. My stuff is just getting really, really sensitive. And I feel like the older I get, the more sensitive my hearing is too.
Yeah. You're 100% right. The neuroscience would back you up, Sean, on multitasking. I love to hear people brag. I'm so good at multitasking. And we learned, no, guess what? You literally can't do it. Our brain is not wired to do three things at once. Well, we were wired to do one thing at once.
True.
To answer your question, the sensitivity that I have, and I'm going to kind of take us to the birth of the Autism Dadvocate. It was 2018. Right. And I will answer your question because I'm going to frame it within the creation of Autism Dadvocate. It was 2018. My son was at 11, almost 12, and that's where it got really highly charged in our household. And I have no hesitation sharing with you, I was in a dark valley of I couldn't solve it. Like I said, I didn't know where to go. I felt emasculated as a man. Why can't I figure this out? What do I do? Who do I reach out to? And there were other things going on in my life that just precipitated just the deepest valley of my life, a very dark place. I never want to go there. It birthed the Autism Dadvocate. I said, I am in a dark place and I am deeply lonely. I am deeply isolated. I do not have anyone to turn to. And if it doesn't exist, I will create it. So, Sean, the learning I think I had for myself was let go of the ego, thinking you can do it on your own. And you've got to reach out to community. You've got to reach out to other dads. You've got to create it. This is why I'm such a fan of Just Two Dads, because that's what you're doing. You're creating this awesome, supportive community. And that's, if I was to say one thing, the biggest learning for any father of an autistic child is the experience can isolate you. Don't let it, because it will drive you to a dark place. Reach out, ask for help. And we as dads, we suck at asking for help. And there's no shame in asking for help or support.
For sure.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this, Paul, because we sort of skipped over, went down a few other paths here, but you know, you talk about your son as a miracle, and then can you talk a little bit about that date of diagnosis? Like what, I know you saw some yellow flags, and then what led to that, and then how did you process that?
It's so funny because you think it would be a very distinct story, but I think it's very common in our community where I saw enough yellow flags that I had a conversation with our PCP. My son and I shared a PCP, and I looked him dead in the eye and I said, Dr. So-and-so, do you think my son may be on the spectrum? And he looked at me and said, no, I think your son has sensory processing disorder. And in the car, I did what all men do. I said to my wife, see, we have nothing to be worried about. Yeah. And that was about a year or 2 years before the formal diagnosis, where we went to a center that had, and you know, it's a very strange diagnostic. It's not science. It's basically a rubric. And that's when we got the diagnosis of autism. So
that's interesting, because you were originally like, no, I mean, it doesn't have it, and you've confirmed it doesn't. So, I'm right. And now a year or two later, you're wrong. And I'm not meaning to call you out on that. I'm just saying, like, just thinking about as men, how'd you process that?
Well, and I think it's because we all have a dream for our child. And my dream prior to that, I didn't really have any awareness of autism. As dads, we have a dream of our son winning the Heisman, of our daughter winning the Nobel Prize. And that just wasn't in the cards. So Brian, Sean, I would hold on to anything that would steer to what I wanted versus the reality.
Yeah.
Wow. So your wife was suspicious all along, or saw things that you didn't see, or?
I think we both did. She probably was more aware simply because she was spending more time with him. I was the breadwinner of the household, working outside the household. She was a little more astute and said, wait a minute.
That's a common theme for our community too, in that the mom is like, hey, something's not wrong. And the dad is like, hey, I think he scratches his butt with intelligence and everything's great.
I would agree.
Nobody scratches their ass like my child.
In my case, Jewish family, my mom was like, I don't know. She's not babbling. And I was like, Budinsky, you don't know what you're talking about, And so I was going to say my experience, which you started to talk about with your experience, Paul, I think with similarity is like the doctor came in and then she started talking and all I heard was wah, 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 wah for 2 hours. I don't even remember what the words were that she used. I was in such a fog from it all. I was like, what are you talking about? A, B, my mother was right. It was, and so anyways, it's fascinating to hear everybody's experience. That date of diagnosis is a point of demarcation. In some cases, it's a relief because you actually have something that now has a lot of study and a lot of, there's a lot of information about. And the other side, it's like sometimes for some people, it feels like a sentencing of, the death of the life that we envision for our child and the rebirth of something new that none of us have experience with. And sometimes that's hardest to deal with is that transition.
It's a tornado of different emotions. I agree, Brian. It's a relief. And then there's the what's next. And right. I think the three of us shared in our pre-conversation after that diagnosis, our healthcare system is so fragmented that there really isn't a next step. And I think that's why we as dads struggle, right? We want a solution and fix like behavioral therapy, occupational therapy. Are there comorbidities? I've heard this thing ABA, and you are on your own.
Yep.
So again, a call out to community. Don't try to figure it out on your own.
It differs state to state. On top of it all, right?
Sure.
So it's another layer of problematic, community-less, efforts. Like what state are you in? Because it's a whole different thing in California than it is in Texas. And so,
and Paul, it's autismadvocate.org?
Autismdadvocate.org and the Autism Dadvocate podcast on iTunes, Spotify, anywhere you can listen to podcast. I'd be curious to hear from the two of you within the My Dad's community. Are there same themes that I hear, or are they different? Because I'll just share with you the themes and you affirm or deny. Within the Autism Dadvocate community, what we hear typically are deep rates of isolation and loneliness, particularly if depending on where that child is on the spectrum. We hear higher rates of mental health, mental challenges. It's a highly charged situation. Higher rates of marital strife. I'd love to quote you statistics on divorce and marital separation in the autism community, but they're very, very dubious. I've heard 80%. That statistically, that is not a viable statistic. And higher rates of addiction, things like alcohol, opioids, any kind of addiction. Is it the same? Are you hearing the same themes, or is it different?
Well, we've definitely heard higher, instance of separation, divorce, much higher than the average community. I think you were the first that mentioned the addiction component to it. I don't know if we've heard that, and at some point I look at that and I like it feels intuitively like that's real, but I don't know statistically. I don't know if the numbers hold. Sean, do you know about that much?
The numbers are huge. And if you think about it, it's another one of those things that the show has brought me to realize, which is that everything that affects the general population, you just take that and put it in our community and add that 10x. So
Amen.
just
Amen.
just like how we talk about your origin, the way you were raised and everything, and what you've got from it, not just the way you were raised, but the environment in which you were raised and what you got from it has everything to do with how you face a diagnosis. Much like one's love language from the book, The Five Love Languages, right? So your example of love dictates the manner in which you speak love. So your example of love will also dictate how you can dictate how you would then deal with a diagnosis. So for instance, someone that's raised in a home where a parent is cold, maybe even mean, there's a little bit of a rolling of the dice that says that child is either going to grow up being the same way or determined to be the exact opposite, right? So the same thing takes place with how you then deal with a diagnosis. You may be like of the mind that you're going to wrap your arms around it and face it head on and everything. You may have someone else that's like, we don't talk about that. So that's not only a gender thing, but then also culture, all these different things. So if you take anything in life, generally speaking, and just add that to it. Yeah, but what I learned, and I think I just realized what it is that you are able to peel away from me on several levels. You talked about loneliness and not being seen. That's the case with most men. Our men's group, the Den, the majority of the members of that group, their wives either convince them to sign up or actually sign them up. There are more men that are in that group than there are men who attend the bi-weekly call. And we take a grown man approach, an adult approach, which is, this is when we're having the call. This is when it takes place. Either you show or you don't. You're loved, no less. And we learn from the financial literacy events that we put on for the special needs community. I, in the beginning especially, would be so keen on how many people showed up, and when they didn't, I'm like, how can I reach people more? What is it? And Brian is the one that would tell me, you know what? All you can do is put the message out there. We don't have anything to do with who does or doesn't receive it. So the focus is on that more than anything else. But I'm saying all that to say that the men that are in the group, some are more vocal and open than others. I don't know of any that's actually come right out and said, I feel lonely at times. Now, what they may do is talk about something that they're going through, something they've experienced, but the stuff, the feelings, all the stuff that you're talking about that most men have, even in an environment like ours, most of the guys don't come right out and say that. So I appreciate you again peeling the layer back where I can put it out there and let people know, hey, it's okay to feel that way.
Sean, we as men have different emotional vocabulary. You nailed it. We don't use those words. But as you said, if you listen a little more deeply, you're going to hear that as a theme. And boy, am I fascinated when you said that the wives are the encouragers or the pushers of this community. Sean Bart, what is behind that? Why as men are we so reluctant to take that step?
Well, I think there's a bit of a, in general, I think a lack of acknowledgement or self-awareness that we need that. We'll tend, things come out in certain behaviors that are an expression. Again, it's how we express. It's an expression of what we're feeling that's more emotional than it is expressive verbalized. So like you said, we don't say I'm lonely, but what often happens in the Den is somebody will say something like, I hate going to bed, by myself and waking up by myself and feeling it all on my own every single day. And someone will go like, man, I feel that too. And that, it feels very alone. So it kind of comes out in hearing other people's expression of it, but people rarely will say, I need this. In other words, it'll come out. And so a lot of times the wives who are much more into, women seem to be much more into that kind of emotional behavior. You go, you might help you to talk to somebody who you can relate to and again, we put the den together and called it the den because that's the place in the house where, you put the game on, you get a couple beers, and everybody's relaxed and just sort of talking without realize that they're sharing the experience, right? And so it's a place of comfort where you can express those kinds of things, even if you're not articulating it verbally,
And here's the thing, the extent to which men are generally and inherently not curious or lack curiosity is not limited by self. So not only are we not as curious as women are generally speaking, but we are even less curious about ourselves because we're so busy masking. So you're not even asking a question like,
yes,
wait a minute, what do I really think about that? So if you're not even asking a question, what are the chances of you finding out who it is that you really are, what it is you're really fearful of, what you're really hopeful of, what you really want, what scares you? You can't, it's not always just about the machismo of like, well, here's what I feel, but I'm not going to tell anybody that. It's about even stopping and asking, wait a minute, what do I really feel? So the power of questions is not only greater than statements, but as important as it is for us to ask that about others, we always need to raise the level of questions and the quality of the questions that we ask ourselves. Brian and I had a disagreement once when we were talking about, Brian said, well, who is it that said that? And the statement I made was like, it said that the quality of our life is determined by the quality of the questions that we ask. Now, I guess you could also then say, well, how do you determine the quality of the question? Well, does the answer to the question or the asking of the question, improve have the potential to improve your way of life? And I guess that's the thing to ask oneself. And, if we're limited that way, then my gosh, no wonder we're behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, it's a lot. By the way, I kind of feel like Sean and I are this whole hour, we've been guests on your show, Paul, because I feel like we shared more than we have asked. I think, but by the way,
he got us to do that, but we enjoy that though.
I knew that was.
Well, Brian, it's what you described in the den. It's talking with other men, and is a layer I want to add to the two of you. I think you may have said it, Sean, that get it. That is my vision for Autism Dadvocate. Can we create a community where there's like-minded men who get it? And I've heard anecdotally, I thought I was the only one that had that. I thought I was the only one. No. You're not alone. This is a community where other men get it.
Yeah.
And it's funny. It goes to this saying that, Sean and I share, we talk about it all the time. And I'd heard it and it struck me powerfully. And I think you'll understand this too. But somebody said our basic needs as human beings is, to be seen, to be heard, to be loved, and to be gotten. We want to be gotten. We want people to get us. It's the worst thing is being invisible, right? Which we talk about.
Yes.
If somebody gets you, you feel seen.
And they're trying to get you.
Yeah, an attempt, but somebody to at least get that you're on a evolutionary journey, or you're on in a challenge, or that you are, again, you're seen. It doesn't matter where you are. Anyways, listen, on that point, I know we've got already close to the end of our time. And so we could have done this for 2 hours. We say that often, but this is a conversation, which Paul, I'm hoping that we actually in the new year, we do this again, because there's so much more that we even didn't get to unpeel and unpack here today. So we love this conversation. We knew we were going to, but before we sign off and say goodbye, we want to hear this question answered by you, because I think this is going to add a huge level of poignancy to today's conversation. Go ahead, Sean.
Yes. And before I jump into the question, just to let you know, our next call for the den is this Sunday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Hopefully you meaning those listening, who love a man who is a father or caregiver, can join. Paul, I'm hoping that you can join and elaborate on what we've talked about here today, get you all the information. But this is the point of the show where we get to the following. Our ability to change the world is based on our ability or our willingness to change ourselves. So with that said, give us just one example of a thought or belief that you once believed strongly, but no longer believe to be true.
Oh, I love the question because it's hearkening back to something we touched on. The belief I had to release is I can do this all on my own. I am a man. I will forge ahead like the lone wolf on the prairie, and I can figure this out all my own. I have released that feeling, and it's all about what you and I, the three of us, were describing. Community, I call it tribe. In fact, I was heavily influenced by the books by Sebastian Junger called Tribe. And that's what I love about the Den is if your listeners take away anything, it's seek community. Yeah. Seek community. That is the best thing that you can do for yourself, for your spouse, and for your child.
Love it. That's beautiful.
No,
that's beautiful. Great. Thank you. And, again, for going some of our typical thank yous at the end of our show, this, again, I'm fired up. I'm energized by this, as I was by our last conversation, Paul. And sometimes for Sean and I, just having these conversations, are so validating for us, and they're supportive of what we're doing and who we are and the evolution. Even sometimes we get caught up in the day-to-day of our busy lives and forget that the things that we're sharing with people, if it strikes a nerve, of one person, we've done something amazing. And having this conversation with you today, I'm hoping a lot of people get some value and seek out that community and seek out that tribe. So thank you for doing that. And thanks everybody for getting the likes and the loves, and hit us up on Facebook, send us an email. We are just2dads@gmail.com. I always say at the end of every show, empathy and love is always so important, and even more so today, every day, even more. If somebody's going through something, have some empathy. You don't know what they're dealing with. You have no idea what's going on in their lives. So be empathetic to another human being. It's what connects us and makes us human. And then finally, if you look at the world through lenses of love, the world is a more beautiful place. So come from a place of empathy and love, and strive to be gotten and to get others as well, I would say. And with that, again, I'm going to throw it over to Sean to sign us off. But Paul, such a great conversation. So grateful to have had you on today. Amazing.
Yes. Paul, thank you so much for the time. Again, questions are more powerful than statements. Let's strive to be more childlike and less childish, and try and be, a little more interested than we strive to be interesting. We actually become more interesting if we're interested in other people. And don't ever stop asking questions about yourself. Raise your consciousness and your curiosity. Everybody needs to be seen, needs to be heard, needs to be gotten, as you said, and needs to be loved. Everyone wants to know that they matter. It does not matter. So with that said, everyone within the sound of our voice, just the other thing, this is the last episode that we will be presenting on Facebook Live going forward into the new year. The episodes will, you can still go to the Facebook page and see the episode by way of the YouTube link and all the other platforms that we're generally on. We want to thank everyone for just another great year, and enjoy the holidays however you may choose to celebrate it. Wish you the most prosperous and healthy and happy new year. Paul, thank you again so much for your time. And to everyone listening, we'll see you in the new year, and we love you. Thank you.
It's been an honor.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year.